to another video from PyNet Labs. So in today's video, we are generally discussing about the switch configuration. So we all know, for any network, switches is considered as a core device. So be it any network, switches is definitely an integral part of the network. And if you are a network engineer, so you should be adept in handling the switches and the routers as well. So most of the time, when we are working in a LAN, when you're about to manage a LAN, the switches are the most important part. So be it for this examination, if you are looking to, or if you are preparing for your examination, or you are a real life working network engineer. So understanding the LAN concepts can actually give you an edge when it comes to manage the local area network.
If you enjoyed the content of the video, don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe to our channel.
So you can very easily manage the switched environment by creating VLAN. So before creating VLAN, you should understand why, what is the need for creating the VLAN. So if you happen to have connected multiple switches together, then you might using STP to prevent loops. So you might have in your network, you might have accidentally configured wrong STP configuration on your switches. That could give rise to network loops, and that is a very bad thing for a network. And if you don't treat it early as you can, so it might lead to some network issues, further network issues. So that is why understanding switching is a very important concept in the networking. And if you want to implement a good network, the switching understanding switching is very, very important. So from the exam perspective, in CCNA, if you are appearing for a CCNA certification, if you are preparing for CCNA certification, so more than 20% topics are from the switching topics, or comes from the switching. And whereas if you're working or looking for CCNP certification, preparing for CCNP, so more than 30 to 40% of the topics are actually from the switches. So from exam perspective, it is definitely important. But also if you are a real life working on switches, so understanding these switches can actually help you in better management. So let's dive into some of the topics, some of the general topics that or some of the general challenges that everyone faces, be it a fresher or be it an experienced person. So for the first time, whenever we are configuring the switches, so Cisco switches and primarily every other vendor switches, they come with a CLI. So whenever you are configuring these switches, you actually have to go down with the commands. Now, for the first time, so for someone who has just recently moved from GUI interface to CLI based interaction, so commands could be a little bit overwhelming. So most of the time, we don't know which command to run, and most of the time, we don't know what the exact command is. So many a times we are like shocked, or we are like kind of like stuck into the configuration. Now it's not that much big a problem here, because Cisco iOS has baked in some useful features that you can actually use while configuring the switches, just in order to make it a little bit easier for you. So the first thing is that you can make use of the tab button. So whenever you are executing a command, suppose you don't know the command, you don't know the spelling, you don't know the full command. So what you can do, you can type the first few letters and you can press the tab button. So it will automatically spell out the rest of the command. So it has two advantages. You don't actually have to remember the command. Secondly, it saves you from any typo error. So it makes sure that you're not entering any typo error, you are not misspelling any of the commands. So you just need to write few of the first two words, and you can press tab here. So if you want, I can show you a demonstration. So suppose this is a network environment, a very simple network environment here. Okay. So if you can look into here, I have a switch, and in this switch there are like 4 devices connected. So let's say if I want to configure this switch, let me get out from here. Suppose if I want to configure, I can use the ENA. I can press the tab, so you can see the rest of the command have been configured. To go into the configuration mode, I can type con. I can press tab. Okay, so you can see the command has been automatically spelled. So this is very handy tool when you are actually going down the configuration. So whenever you are configuring the interfaces and everything, make sure that you use the tab as much as you can. So rather than doing the typing manually, it actually makes you operate the switch faster, and it also reduces the chances of typo errors. Okay, so like right now, you just saw that when I was typing, I made some typo error, and with tab, I can actually prevent that error. Okay. The second thing is that contextual help. So many times you don't remember like what commands to run. So what you can do, you can put a question mark here. And when you put a question mark, you can get a contextual help. So you can actually look into this thing. Suppose I want to monitor the performance of my switch, but I don't know what command I should use, and I don't remember what I have to actually use beside after show. So what I can do, I can put a question mark. So you can see every a command that you can actually use with an show command is being shown here. So you can actually use the textual command. So here you can see I wrote the command as show version. I put a question mark. This question mark is for the contextual help. So every time you do, it suggests you like what else can you use with this command, or whether this command is correct or not. Okay. So this is generally the how you can efficiently operate this is iOS CLI. Further, if you ever make a mistakes, so suppose if I intentionally make some mistakes here. Okay, so what happens here? The Cisco CLI also inputs like where you are making the mistake. So you see here that I'm getting an error. It says that it recognized some invalid input. And if you follow this arrow, you can very easily spot what could be the issue here. So it might seem a little bit complex at first when you are actually starting with the switching basics, but once you're down with the CLI things, it's pretty simple. So these are some of the common things that most of these mm, engineers face, whether you are a fresher, whether you are a experienced one. So you always came across this kind of issue. So if you remember these two things, it might actually help you save a lot of time, and it might actually make the configuration process a whole lot easier. Okay. Now, most of the times, the second thing is that happens like for anyone who is like operating a switch, it's like a challenge, could be a challenge to identify or gather facts or gather the information regarding for the troubleshooting issue. So there are a bunch of commands that you can actually use in your switching environment just to get the information. So the first command is the show version. So when you run the show version, you get the quite a lot of information, the base MAC address, the hardware information and things like that. You can actually use the show users command. So it will show you all the remotely logged in users. Suppose you want to check the VLAN. VLAN is a very important concept of switch or LAN management. So you can run the command like show IP VLAN brief. So it will show you all the VLANs you right now have in your environment. Okay, so you can read here like what VLANs we have and what are the active members. So if I talk about VLAN 1, the default VLAN, these are the active members. Okay, so if you want to make sure the PCs are able to communicate with each other, make sure that you add them on a single VLAN. And if I check over here, I also happen to have another VLAN, VLAN 10 by the name sales. And you can have like it has somewhat around like 10 VLANs. Okay. So make sure that you use the show version. Another command is the show version IP interface brief that actually give you information of all the connected interfaces in your switches in a brief. So here you can see basically make out like which devices are like up, which devices are currently active, and what all devices are currently downstate. Okay, so with this also, this could be helpful whether suppose if you want to identify whether a device is connected or not, you can actually go with this command. If you want to learn the specifics about any interface, what you can do, you can run the command show interface FA. And here you can see a specific information about a single interface, like the name, the hardware address, the bandwidth, delay, things like that. So this is yet another important command that might actually help you in understanding and troubleshooting. Now, if we move on to the next challenge that most of us faces is that whenever you're configuring, make sure you use proper names. Okay, so whenever you are configuring VLANs, something like that, VLANs, whenever you are configuring interfaces, make sure that you use proper names and description just to make them stand apart. Okay, so like we have discussed, like we have studied, VLANs are an essential tool in managing the LAN. So when creating VLANs, make sure that you use proper name. So suppose if I'm creating a VLAN 1 and this is for internet, here I'm providing internet. What I can do, I can actually use the name like internet. Okay, so when I might be reviewing my configuration, so this information might actually help me to understand like what this VLAN is for. So earlier I created a VLAN with the name sales. So with this, I can understand like, okay, this is might be for the sales network. Suppose I have a VoIP devices. So what I can do, I can create a VLAN and I can give it a name like VoIP. Okay, so the next time when you are reviewing the VLAN configuration, you can see, okay, fine, this is the VoIP VLAN. So using proper names can be actually helpful when you are actually reviewing, troubleshooting, or monitoring or managing your switches. So I would recommend whenever you are going down with the configuration, make sure you use proper names, proper naming convention, just to make it differentiate. Further, whenever you are configuring any interface, you can also add some description as well. So suppose if you don't know which interface is being used to connect to the router, so what you can do, you can go to any of the interface and you can put a description here. So I can write it here like connected to router, something like that. Okay, so whatever best describes your interface, you can add it here. Okay, so you can add descriptions like that, and you can run the command like show interface FA, or you can simply run the show interface. So here you can see that the description that we have added here is available. So this description matter actually helps you in understanding like which interfaces is being used to connect what. So suppose if you have a trunk interface, suppose I have interface 02 as the trunk. So when I'm creating this interface as a trunk, okay, so what I can do, I can add a description. So I can add a description like something like this, trunk interface. Make sure that your description is under double quotes. Okay. And you can actually check the interface here. So when we are checking the interface 02, you can see there is the description. So description can be little helpful. So it's like an extra bit of command, but if you like something who likes to keep things organized to make it easier for everyone to understand, you can actually put some description. The second thing that I would recommend when we are configuring switches, while we are going with the configuration, I would recommend that you can actually go for templates. So rather than suppose if you are configuring multiple switches, you happen to have like multiple switches in your network and you have to manually configure each one of them, but the configuration you are doing are exactly the same. Okay, so what you can do, rather going into the switches and typing the commands individually, what you can do, you can actually create a template. So what templates are pretty simple, no fancy thing. You just need to type in the command in the notepad, and every time you wish to configure your devices, or every time you wish to configure your switches, what you can do, you can use this command. So suppose like I'm using here something like I want to create a VLAN by the name of marketing. So what I can actually do, I can simply copy this command. So I'm copying this command here. Okay, and I'm going into my switch here. Let me show you, I don't have a VLAN 15 here. As you can see, I have 10, 11, 12. So when I go to the configuration mode and when I paste this command, okay, so this command executed. And if I check the VLAN configuration, so you can see that I already have the VLAN. So if you are making this configuration repeatedly on every single switch, so I would recommend that you make use of a notepad. Okay. And further, just let's look into this command as well. So here I want to assign some interfaces. So let's say, let me just make it 15. And just like that, you can edit it in the real time. You can select the commands like this, and you can go back to your switch and you can paste it here. Okay, so that's it. Now let's see whether the command worked or not. So you can see right now my interface, my VLAN marketing has an active member, that is FA1. Okay, so these are some of the essential tips that you can actually implement in your working, or whether you are preparing for a examination or whether you are working in a real life environment. So you can make use of these tips to make it a little bit easier for you to configure the switches. The last tip for today is something like we all know like switches have a higher port density compared to any other devices. So when we are working with switches, generally there are quite a lot of interface. So it's not very sensible or very reasonable when you have to configure the multiple interfaces and you are taking all the interfaces one by one. So you're configuring interfaces one by one. So rather than going into the interfaces individually, you can use the range command. So if you happen to work with, or you require to work with multiple interfaces, so what you can do, you can actually select a group of interfaces by running the interface range command. Suppose I want to work with FA20 all the way to, let's say, 24. Okay, so I have selected all this interface collectively and I can make them the access port. Okay, and I can also assign them to a VLAN 15, let's say. Let's see. Let's check the VLAN configuration. So here you can see, like on my VLAN 15, we already have the interfaces. So these are some of the essential tips that have helped me a lot in my real life environment as well as in my certification. So this is something, so you can actually make use of these steps or these tips in your implementation that could actually help you save a lot of time and also ensuring that you master the switching configuration. So that's all for today, guys. Do let us know which out of the tips and tricks that I have shared, which one was your favorite. And in case if you want to learn about something specific, don't forget to mention it in the comments. Thank you, everyone.